Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast.
Right now, your brain is actively tricking you into sabotaging your own career.
Yeah. And the worst part is, it is doing it by making you feel incredibly productive.
Oh, absolutely.
You know the feeling. You sit down at your desk with this massive, needle-moving project just looming over you.
Right. The one you've been dreading all week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead of actually opening that document, you fire up the laptop and start clearing your inbox.
Yeah. Or you decide right then that you need to color code your calendar for the entire month.
Yes, you organize your desktop folders into this flawless hierarchy, and you feel like a machine.
You really do.
But then, 5 o'clock rolls around, you look at your to-do list, and that one critical project hasn't even been touched.
It is the ultimate paradox of the modern workplace, really.
It just is.
You are mentally exhausted from running on a treadmill all day, yet you have moved literally 0 inches towards your actual destination.
So today, we are taking a deep dive into an incredibly revealing article by Felix Romer. He is the founder of SmartKeys.org.
And he has put together what I can only really describe as a survival guide for modern professionals dealing with this exact phenomenon.
Right, because we are all dealing with it. We are going to look at the underlying psychology of task avoidance, why the business landscape practically, encourages it.
Yeah, and most importantly, how you, the listener, can evaluate your own workday habits to actually outpace the competition.
Because the whole goal of this deep dive is to give you the strategic insights you need to break out of that busy work trap once and for all.
So the term Romer uses for this trap is productive procrastination.
Productive procrastination.
Right. It happens when you deliberately complete secondary low-impact tasks as a way to actively avoid the primary task that actually matters.
You are basically hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. You are getting this tiny hit of progress, a little jolt of accomplishment from crossing off an email.
Yeah.
But the main objective remains entirely stagnant.
But on the surface, it sounds completely irrational.
It really does.
If we know that our careers depend on finishing the big, complex projects and the business world demands actual results, why would our own neurology actively choose to do trivial busy work instead?
Well, it all comes down to how the human brain processes uncertainty and perceived threats.
Okay. Threats, like physical threats.
Sort of. When you are faced with a high-stakes task, let's say writing a comprehensive quarterly strategy,
Right.
that task is usually pretty vague.
Yeah.
It's complex, and it carries a real risk of failure or,
Well,
criticism.
yeah. Oh, for sure. It is intimidating.
And your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, perceives that ambiguity and risk as a literal threat.
Wow.
Yeah, it generates friction and anxiety, and your brain is just hardwired to escape anxiety as quickly as it possibly can.
So it looks for a way out.
Exactly. It seeks certainty, it looks for a task with a guaranteed immediate reward and 0 ambiguity.
Like sorting emails by date.
Right. There is no risk of failure there. Tidying a desk, highly predictable. The brain basically chooses the busy work to self-soothe.
So the busy work is essentially a neurological coping mechanism for workplace anxiety.
That is the absolute core of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Academic Piers Steele explored this heavily in his research.
Really?
Yeah, and you will often hear it referred to as procrastivity, or positive procrastination, or even structural procrastination.
Now, crastivity, I kind of like that one.
It is catchy, right. But the mechanism across all those terms is identical. The brain is opting for quick, low-value wins to artificially lower short-term discomfort.
While just completely ignoring the long-term costs.
Precisely.
I think of it like the body's metabolic reaction to junk food.
Oh, that is a great way to look at it.
Right, like productive procrastination is like eating a massive sleeve of highly processed, sugary snacks when you are supposedly training for a marathon.
Yeah.
You feel that pang of hunger, which in this case represents the short-term anxiety of a blank page.
Right, the friction.
And you eat the junk, it spikes your blood sugar, it relieves the immediate hunger, and the physical act of chewing tricks your body into thinking it is being fueled.
But you are completely starving your system of the actual complex nutrients required to sustain the long-term goal.
Exactly. You feel full, but you are effectively malnourished.
That analogy hits the mark perfectly, especially regarding that false sense of energy. You are filling the hours, but starving the project of deep focus.
Yeah.
And I actually want to add a crucial layer of context here from the source material regarding neurodivergent.
Oh, please do. That is so important.
For professionals navigating ADHD or other executive function challenges, this dynamic is not just a mild hurdle.
Right.
It is a really significant structural barrier.
Because things like task initiation, sustaining goal-directed motivation, and working memory, those are the exact executive functions that are impaired.
Exactly. The source notes that for individuals with ADHD, the friction required to start a vague task is inherently higher, just due to differences in dopamine regulation.
That makes total sense.
So they might initiate a dozen minor tasks, constantly seeking that necessary dopamine release.
Right, but without ever being able to sustain the effort required for the primary deliverable.
Yeah. And the practical takeaway here is just vital. This has to be treated as a systems issue, not a character flaw.
Not a moral failing.
Never. It has nothing to do with a lack of willpower or professional dedication. It is about understanding the unique neurochemical system of your brain and deploying the right external scaffolding to navigate it.
I love that, external scaffolding. But, okay, what happens when the deadline for that massive project finally arrives?
Oh, the panic sets in.
We have all experienced this, right? Suddenly, the desk organizing stops, and you are working at warp speed at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, the source material calls that the rescuer effect.
The rescuer effect.
Right. As the deadline closes in, the perceived threat of the task is finally outweighed by the very real, immediate threat of missing the deadline.
And facing the professional consequences.
Exactly. That intense pressure triggers the fight-or-flight response. Your system gets flooded with this massive spike of adrenaline, norepinephrine, and dopamine.
So it actually feels good.
In a weird way, yes. This last-minute panicked sprint actually feels incredibly powerful. It feels like you are finally functioning at peak capacity.
I mean, I have definitely felt that rush, but relying on a panic-induced chemical cocktail is a terrible long-term career strategy.
No, it is entirely unsustainable.
Right.
When you rely on the rescuer effect, you are literally conditioning your brain to require panic before it will begin working.
Wow. You were training yourself to need the stress?
Yeah. You trade a minor reduction in short-term discomfort for a chronic, massive spike in long-term cortisol and stress.
And that has to affect the work itself, right?
Absolutely. Operating constantly in a state of adrenaline-fueled urgency shrinks your available time for revision. It kills creative problem-solving, and inevitably, it degrades the quality of your output.
So, if we know this neurological trap is waiting for us every single time we open our laptops, how do we identify it in real time?
That is the million-dollar question.
Like, how do we catch ourselves before an entire workday just vanishes into the void of busy work?
Well, the source categorizes the signs of productive procrastination into two distinct camps: obvious signs and what it labels sneaky drains.
Sneaky drains. Okay, what are the obvious ones?
The obvious ones are usually physical: tidying the workspace, shopping online for a new productivity planner before you can, truly begin.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
classic, I need a new notebook trap.
Right. Or suddenly deciding you absolutely must clean the kitchen if you work from home.
Those are the moments where you have to literally stop and ask yourself why the sudden urge to vacuum is so overwhelming.
Exactly.
But the sneaky drains, those seem far more dangerous, especially in a corporate or competitive setting.
Oh, they are insidious because they masquerade as vital strategic work.
Like what is an example?
Like spending 2 hours testing different typography for a slide deck,
Mm.
or meticulously researching a minor data point that will occupy like half a sentence in a 50-page report.
I am definitely guilty of that one.
Right. Or falling into what they call admin drift.
Admin drift.
Yeah, where you spend your entire morning refining and color-coding your task management software instead of executing a single task inside it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
These choices look and feel like quality control, but they're secretly siphoning the cognitive bandwidth that your main deliverable actually requires.
The article also discusses this concept of over-engineering a project, and I have absolutely fallen victim to this.
Most high performers do.
You take a relatively straightforward deliverable, and you convince yourself it needs to be a massive, sprawling portfolio.
Right.
And tell yourself you are just being thorough and delivering excellence. But what you are really doing is creating an artificial barrier that prevents you from ever having to face the vulnerability of hitting ship.
That is exactly it. And the proposed solution for over-engineering is to establish a ruthless definition of done for version 1.
Definition of done. I like that.
Yeah. Before you even begin, You literally write down the absolute minimum requirements for the project to function and meet the baseline objectives.
So nothing extra.
Nothing. Every single nice-to-have feature, every extra slide, every additional round of polish goes into a parking lot document to be reviewed only after version 1 is complete.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second on behalf of the listener.
Sure.
If I am preparing a pitch deck for a massive client, I cannot just slap together a baseline version and call it a day, right?
Right.
Sourcing the right data, building a visually clean deck, and refining the argument, that is the work. Quality and preparation are genuine requirements to stay competitive.
Absolutely true.
So at what point does gathering materials and refining a presentation cross the line from necessary strategic preparation into just, hiding from the hard work?
It is a super blurry line, but the source material provides a highly effective, simple test to cut through that ambiguity.
Okay, what is the test?
You literally stop and ask yourself, if I only had 30 minutes left in my entire workday today, would I pick this specific task over the main deliverable?
Oh, wow. That immediately changes the perspective.
It forces brutal prioritization. If the answer is no, then spending an hour formatting a single slide right now is an avoidance tactic.
That makes so much sense.
If taking 5 minutes to clear your desk genuinely removes a distraction so you can write, then okay, it is strategic prep.
Right.
But if you've spent 2 hours alphabetizing reference files and you still haven't drafted the executive summary, you are caught in a sneaky drain.
You are procrastinating. So let's assume we use that 30-minute test and we catch ourselves red-handed.
Okay.
We are officially procrastinating productively. We understand our amygdala is looking for safety. What are the tactical, software-like protocols we can deploy to break the cycle and force our brains into deep work?
Well, the SmartKeys resources outline a really comprehensive micro-productivity toolkit. And the strategy actually begins before you even sit down at the desk.
Okay.
With a protocol called the momentum morning.
The momentum morning. So the premise here is to protect your mind right out of the gate.
Exactly.
You deliberately block the first 30 to 60 minutes of your day to be completely devoid of social media, news feeds, and email notifications.
No scrolling whatsoever.
Right. Instead, you hydrate, you get exposure to natural sunlight, and you clear out mental clutter through brief journaling or just quiet reflection.
And if we look at the neurochemistry behind this, it is entirely about protecting your dopamine baseline.
How so?
If you wake up and immediately flood your brain with highly stimulating, cheap dopamine from scrolling a social feed or checking urgent emails, you artificially spike your baseline.
Yeah.
And when you finally sit down to do deep, focused work, which is a slow, challenging burn, it will feel agonizingly boring by comparison.
Because your brain is used to the fast, cheap hits.
Right. The momentum morning sets the biochemical stage for focus. Once you are at the desk, the core structural strategy is time blocking.
And I think most professionals are familiar with the concept of time blocking, right? Setting a fixed chunk of time, say 25 to 50 minutes, dedicated solely to one task.
Sure, yeah.
But the article introduces a layer to this called minute budgets, which I honestly found to be the real game changer.
Oh, minute budgets are fantastic.
Yeah.
They're designed specifically to cap the sneaky drains and rabbit holes.
This is Parkinson's law, right?
Exactly. Parkinson's law dictates that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. If you leave research open-ended, you will research for 4 hours.
Easily.
Minute budgets artificially constrain the work. You allocate exactly 10 minutes for formatting the document or a strict 15 minutes for pulling data points.
And when the timer goes off?
The moment the timer goes off, you must stop and move to execution. You can utilize simple, everyday tools like Todoist or a basic Google Calendar to ruthlessly enforce these limits.
That is so practical. The resources also dig into some highly effective micro-productivity hacks for when the friction of starting feels just, insurmountable.
Yeah.
The one that stood out to me is the 5-minute promise. You basically negotiate with yourself to work on the dreaded task for just 5 minutes. And if you want to quit after 5 minutes, you actually have permission to do so.
Yeah, and the mechanism behind the 5-minute promise is all about lowering activation energy.
Lowering the barrier to entry.
Exactly. The amygdala is flashing a threat warning because the project seems overwhelmingly large. By reducing the commitment to just 5 minutes, you lower the perceived threat level.
You are basically proving to your brain that the task won't harm you.
Right. And once you overcome that initial static friction and actually begin, the kinetic energy takes over, and it becomes significantly easier to just keep going.
That is brilliant.
The toolkit also includes the 2-minute rule. If a minor administrative task takes less than 2 minutes, Do it immediately to clear the cognitive blocker from your mental RAM.
Get it out of the way.
Exactly. And finally, eating the frog, which is the practice of tackling your hardest, most anxiety-inducing task first thing in the morning when your cognitive reserves are at their highest.
And it is so important to point out that the stakes for implementing these tools are much higher than just, missing a deadline.
Vastly higher.
The workplace wellness data included in the source material highlights a really severe issue. 83% of U.S. workers report suffering from work-related stress.
83%.
Mm.
It is a systemic crisis.
Yeah.
And that volume of chronic stress absolutely devastates cognitive function and productivity. Over half of those stressed employees report feeling disengaged, which leads to higher error rates and burnout.
It is a vicious cycle.
It really is. Managing your workflow isn't just about output anymore. It is critical infrastructure for protecting human capital.
Wow, yeah.
The source advocates for using frameworks like the Eisenhower matrix to regain a sense of control over prioritization. And doing that alongside fiercely protecting your energy reserves by prioritizing sleep and taking short, deliberate movement breaks to restore those depleted brain chemicals.
But, okay, we have to address the reality of the daily grind.
Let's do it.
What about the days where you sit down, you look at your beautifully organized Eisenhower matrix, and your motivation is sitting at absolute zero?
We all have those days.
Right. You understand activation energy, you have your minute budget set up, but the mental tank is completely empty. How do you utilize what the article refers to as mood tools when you simply do not want to work?
Well, this requires a fundamental shift in how we speak to ourselves.
Okay.
The source emphasizes that harsh self-criticism, perfectionism, and the fear of failure are the primary fuels for delay. When your motivation is non-existent, you have to drop what they call the mood rules.
The mood rules.
Yeah, that is the false belief that you need to feel inspired, energized, or, in the right mood to produce good work.
So you basically abandon the requirement for inspiration and just start anyway.
You start, but you drastically shrink the demand you place on yourself. You utilize kinder self-talk.
Give yourself some grace.
Exactly. You say, 10 minutes of terrible work is enough for today. Version 1 just needs to exist on paper so I have something to edit later.
That takes so much pressure off.
It really does. You could also use external environmental triggers like a specific cup of warm tea or a dedicated focused playlist to signal to your brain that it is time to shift gears.
Oh, I use playlists for that all the time.
It works. And perhaps most importantly, you actively track your micro wins at the end of each work block.
Now, why is the tracking part so critical when motivation is low?
Because it creates an artificial feedback loop.
Okay.
Completing a tiny task and acknowledging it triggers a microdose of dopamine. That dopamine reinforces the neural pathway associated with starting and finishing.
So you are building the habit.
You're essentially hacking your own neurochemistry to manufacture momentum out of thin air when natural motivation is completely absent.
Okay, so we have the momentum morning to protect our baseline. We have the time blocks and minute budgets to cap the rabbit holes, and the psychological tools to hack our motivation when the tank is empty.
Right.
We have the mechanics to force ourselves to do the work. But that leads to the ultimate strategic question, doesn't it?
It does.
Once we are working, how do we ensure the work we're actually doing matters in the long run?
That is the pivotal transition. Mastering productivity mechanics is useless if you are just executing the wrong tasks efficiently.
You are just running faster in the wrong direction.
Precisely. The source material introduces a brilliant conceptual shift here to help professionals transcend basic time management and actually outpace the competition.
Let's hear it.
Most listeners are likely familiar with Stephen Covey's traditional matrix, right?
Yeah.
The one that filters tasks by urgency and importance?
Right. Is the task on fire right now, and does it carry significant weight?
Yeah. But the problem with only using urgency and importance is that it keeps you trapped in the present moment.
You are just reacting.
Exactly. So the author introduces Rory Vaden's concept of significance to act as a third clarifying lens.
Significance.
Right. So you don't just ask 2 questions, you ask 3. How soon does this matter? How much does it matter? And the critical significance question, how long will it matter?
How long will it matter? That completely alters the calculation of what deserves your attention.
It forces a shift from focusing on the volume of tasks completed to the actual compounding results of your effort.
Quality over quantity, but on a strategic level.
Exactly. If you want to build a resilient, forward-moving career, you have to accept that busy tasks almost never change the long-term outcome. Firing off 100 perfectly formatted emails today might feel super productive.
But it likely won't matter at all by next quarter.
Not one bit.
We are so culturally conditioned in the modern workplace to reward responsiveness over deep work.
Oh, totally.
We celebrate the zero inbox or the completely crossed off to-do list, regardless of the actual substance of those tasks.
It is a very dangerous metric.
It reminds me of a company aggressively cutting its research and development team to show a really impressive, quick profit for the quarterly earnings call.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. The ledger looks fantastic today, and the executives feel productive. But in 3 years, the company will be entirely obsolete because they stopped building the complex, difficult things that guarantee future relevance.
That is productive procrastination playing out on a macro organizational scale.
Exactly.
To escape that trap as an individual professional, the source insists we must become absolutely ruthless about eliminating, automating, or delegating the trivial.
You have to protect your time.
Yeah. If a task involves routine data entry, basic scheduling, or repetitive formatting, and it consumes your bandwidth while adding minimal long-term value, you have to find a way to get it off your plate.
Because shifting your limited cognitive energy toward choices that compound in value over time is how you actually build irreplaceable skills and generate lasting results.
You just have to cultivate the discipline to say no to low-value urgency.
Which means that achieving true significance requires giving yourself permission to be uncomfortable.
Yes, it really does.
You have to be okay with leaving a few emails unanswered for a day or letting your desk remain a little untidy if that short-term chaos buys you the deep focus required to execute the high-impact work.
Exactly. You're trading the cheap dopamine of a clean inbox for the compounding interest of a major career milestone.
You are choosing to invest in the work that pays dividends tomorrow, rather than the busy work that merely makes you feel safe today.
That is the fundamental message of the research right there.
Well, we have journeyed through the amygdala's threat response. We have identified the sneaky drains hiding in our workflows, unpacked the microproductivity toolkit, and fundamentally shifted our perspective using the lens of significance.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, what is a final provocative thought you want the listener to take away and just, mull over?
I want you to mentally pull up that one major intimidating project you have been endlessly preparing for all month.
Oh, we all have one.
The one you are gathering resources for, building outlines for, and trying to plan perfectly before you even begin.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped organizing it tomorrow, let go of the need for certainty, and simply shipped the messy, unpolished version 1?
That is a scary thought, but a necessary one. Thank you so much for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast. If you found value in breaking down these workflows, we strongly encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you can continue staying ahead of future business trends and cognitive strategies.
Highly recommended.
And please do yourself a massive favor and read Felix Rumor's full article. We have made it super easy by putting the link right in the show notes. Until next time, give yourself permission to ignore the busy work and embrace the messy version 1.